Hello, in this video I'm covering the game between Maxime Vachier Lagrave and Fabiano Caruana from round 10 of Grand Swiss. We had a real Lopez. For now, just typical moves. And here a4. Black answer with bishop b7. Now white tries to develop his pieces by d3. Black also defends e5 by d6, and now bishop d2 first. Knight c3 was also possible, and black would play something like knight a5, and after bishop a2 to go b4, and we get this knight from c3, which would lead to a balanced game. Instead, he plays bishop d2 here, and now black plays b4, tries to hinder the development of knight on b1, so white chose to play c3. He wants to provoke taking and knight getting into the play. And after knight a5, now this would be slightly better for white, because after c5 to stop b4, now knight d5 is good, and the point being that capturing on d5 is not good, because after this knight on a5 is out of play. Instead, black gives up a pawn, just temporarily. White took on b4, and now he goes bishop c8. Now the b4 pawn is under attack, and white cannot defend it, so he pushes b5. Black took. White took back, and after h3, he goes back to b8. White finishes his development by knight c3, and now bishop e6 was played. And black is not afraid of doubling the pawns, because if he does this, and if white goes knight g5, then black can simply play queen d7, defend this pawn, and create some problems for white, because he also has a problem with d4 square, which is weakened, and b2 pawn is also weak. So if he goes to c1, then black has an opportunity to go knight d4 and activate his pieces even more. He doesn't capture on e6, he goes knight d5 instead. And now black took, and now white takes on d5 with bishop. If he takes with the pawn here, then black plays knight b4, and now the d5 pawn is under attack. So he took with the bishop, so in case of capturing, which happened in the game, ed knight b4, he can play queen b3, defending both pawns. Now black defends his knight with c5, and now white puts pressure on the knight on b4 by rook a4. Knight has to go back to a6, queen a2, and now knight c7, getting back and also putting some pressure on the d5 pawn. Bishop a5, white is hinting that he wants to eliminate the knight, which puts a lot of pressure on the d5 pawn, and in the case knight goes from the board, then attacking this d5 pawn will become really hard. Black goes queen d7, and now he takes and goes knight d2, aiming towards c4 to put pressure on d6. And now to stop that, black plays queen b7, because now after knight c4, d5 pawn is going to be taken. Now rook a7, attacking the queen, and also at the same time aiming at the bishop on e7. Black has to go to b4, because if he takes on b2, then takes and knight c4, and black cannot defend his bishop on e7. So here he goes queen b4, and now MVL plays rook d1. I think it was slightly better to play rook e2, and if black defends like rook f8, defending his bishop, then after knight c4, it looks like this position is slightly more pleasant for white, because when you compare this knight on c4, which is well placed on c4, and when you look at this bishop on e7, which is limited by his own pawns, you see that it's easier to play with white. But instead he plays, in this position, he plays rook d1. Now rook b7 was played, and now knight c4. They exchange, and now queen b3. Now if white plays rook d2, that would be bad because of bishop g5, and rook would have to go to e2, after which he loses the d3 pawn, and also he loses a piece because he cannot defend the knight and the rook at the same time. So he has to go to e1, after which he took on d3. Now queen e7, queen c4, and queen d6. Queen d4, and now white took on e5 with queen. Also, rook e5 was possible, maybe even better, keeping heavy pieces on the board, and after queen b2, would be a mistake, because after queen e7, the d pawn would be very dangerous, and it would be hard for black to survive this. But instead, he would play h6, and in case of queen e7 now, to push d6, he would have a nice counterplay with rook b8, targeting b2 and also f2 pawn. So in case of queen c7, he would go back, because in this case, if you try to capture, then this leads to a checkmate in a couple of moves. After this, king h7, queen f5, and rook e8 next. And in case of g6, you can just capture on f7 and rook e8. So after queen c7, you go back, but now white cannot push d6. And it's tough to say if white can really press in this position, because the queen is too active on d4, and white has to be worried about perpetual checks and other sources of counterplay. Instead, he took on e5, and now he enters a rook ending with a pawn up, but with not many chances to convert this advantage. Now Fabiano plays f6, and now rook f5 was played. But now black plays rook b8, targeting b2. Now d6 was played by MVL, now he took on b2, rook c5, and now rook d2. He goes from behind. Rook c8 check, king f7, and now if he tried rook d8, just king e6 is a simple draw, taking on d6 next. He tried this, and now king f8. So he played rook d7, now g5 was played, not worrying about his h7 pawn, because d6 would hang and it would lead to a draw. g3 by white, and now h5. Now white plays h4, having nothing better, because if he plays something like king g2, black can play king e8, and after this go back. And in case of rook e6, king f7, still forcing white to repeat moves. He had nothing better, so he went for h4, Fabi took, gh, and now king e8. And now he goes for the h5 pawn, but now... And after king f7, king g2, king g6, rook a5, but now black is trying to cut off white's king with rook d3, and after h5, king h6, f3, now he goes to d1. Now the idea being that after king g3, he goes to g1, and after king f4 to attack the h5 pawn, and now he's going to always attack this h5 pawn. White tried with rook f5, but after rook f5, Fabi gave a check, and in this position they agreed to a draw, because if he goes to g3, black can capture on h5. If they exchange that, then this pawn ending is a draw. And if white takes on f6, he goes back to g7, and this rook ending is a draw also. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.